I think we're all here. Is that correct?
We are here.
We're
Yes.
on.
Yeah.
We are live. And I want to first of all welcome everybody to this conversation this evening. Evening if you're in the UK or Europe. It's still the afternoon here in New York City. And my name is Michael Moore. And we're going to talk about one of the best documentaries I've seen in recent years here tonight with its writers, director, producer, and an actor who plays a very significant role in a documentary, which is not a sentence you usually hear. But I first want to just say greetings to everybody. We have a lot of people on this tonight that are members of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, and also BAFTA, and a few others have joined us. So welcome. It's kind of too obviously ironic for me to be hosting a discussion tonight about a film with the word coup in it, because the last 24 hours here in this country, when exactly 24 hours ago right now, we were watching what certainly looked like some form of coup, attempted coup. The president of the United States sent approximately 40,000 people down Pennsylvania Avenue, encouraging them to what was hashtag storm the Capitol. You know, not very subtle, kind of a little too, on the nose. Those were their marching orders. And he also said he would join them, which of course he didn't. And as you've all seen on the news today, I think I can speak for a lot of Americans, especially the ones watching this, that it was not a good feeling yesterday. And it was something a lot of us have feared for these 4 years. We've got 13 more days of this individual who a former national security advisor today called him the United States #1 national security threat. And so moves are afoot amongst certain cabinet members to see if they can have him removed. And both the Democratic leaders in the House and the Senate said if the cabinet doesn't do that, they will commence impeachment proceedings immediately. So that's the news from the United States end of this. And but I'm so honored to have been asked to moderate this discussion tonight, because the coup we're talking about in Coup 53 was back in our sort of the early years of the American way of getting rid of governments and people that we didn't care for. And with the expert help of the British MI6, in 1953, we were able to remove a democratically elected prime minister, president of Iran, and install in his place the person who became known as the Shah of Iran. This particular documentary tells a story I think a lot of Americans, probably a lot of Brits, but certainly a lot of Americans don't know. And it's stunning. It's a stunning film. And when you see it if you know it in the context of the other coups that took place after this one, the coup in Guatemala, the coup in South Vietnam, assassinations or assassination attempts by the CIA or by MI6, there became a sad and long history of this. But it's always good to go back to the OG. And in our modern era, post World War II, what happened in Iran is something that we need to teach our children. Generations after us need to remember and know about this. And this film, I think, has really pulled this off in such a marvelous way, and has done it in certain unique ways that a lot of us who make documentaries, some do. I mean, we all try different things, different experiments, but the director of this film decided not to just follow the cookie cutter approach, but to attempt to tell a story in some unique ways. If you've already seen the film, you know what I'm talking about. So let me introduce our guest here tonight. I have these sort of semi-long biography sheet that was sent to me, but some of this is not. Um, you know Rafe and you know Walter, but I'll say a few words about each of them. Rafe Fiennes, of course, one of our great actors, was stage and film. He was last on stage at the National Theatre in London in Antony and Cleopatra. He has been in films from obviously The English Patient, Schindler's List, The Grand Budapest Hotel, and an amazing film, Coriolanus. I think, Rafe, am I saying the name of that correctly?
You can say Coriolanus or Coriolanus.
It's. I think Michigan's kind of in the Midwest, so I can go either way with the accent on that. But also The God of Carnage. I mean, everyone knows the list. Plus playing M in these two James Bond films. It's a real pleasure and an honor, Rafe, to have you here with us. And in this particular documentary, we'll get into talking about your role in this, because you're not acting as a character, and yet you are representing. Walter said this earlier. A good word to use is that you're the avatar, essentially, of this main character, who's no longer with us, so couldn't be filmed. And so you, using his words, bring us into his world and his life and his critical part of this story in Coup 53. So thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Walter Murch, again, all Academy and BAFTA members. You know him through his work as editor, sound designer, numerous roles that he's played in films such as Godfather, Godfather 2, Godfather 3, American Graffiti, The Conversation, Apocalypse Now, The English Patient, so many more. And to those of us who are also editors and work on this end of filmmaking, he is one of our icons, and his inventiveness and new ways of trying to create cinema, especially through the art of editing. And I know I've spoken to a lot of you, my fellow documentary filmmakers, that I have felt for some time that the Writers Guild should admit editors of documentaries, because they really are our co-editors. It's nothing against people who edit fiction films, but at least they have a script and they have a shot list and things that they're following. And an editor of a documentary just has a gazillion hours of footage and hopefully a director that's got an idea. But every editor I've worked with, I should go back and I should just publicly declare from this point on that they will share whatever the guild will allow me to do, and this is exactly what's happened in this case, where Walter, in addition to editing this incredible documentary, is also the co-writer of it. He's credited as the co-writer with Taghi, the director of the film. So it was inspiring to sort of see that. And I think she's 3 Oscars now. Walter, is that where you're at? Yeah, that's as far as.
And 3 BAFTAs.
And 3 BAFTAs.
Yep.
So Well, good on you.
I keep trying. I keep trying.
Keep trying. Right now, it's a race between the BAFTAs and the Oscars.
Yeah.
But how wonderful, and I want to hear the story of how you came to be involved in this film. The director of this film and co-writer and producer is Taghi Amirani. Taghi was born in Iran at the age of 15. His family moved to England, and this was, I think, about probably 4 years before the Iranian Revolution. He studied at Nottingham University. He studied physics, which is the exact path most documentary filmmakers have taken. And he, but also then started making documentaries. He got into the film school at Bristol University, then got into working in British TV, and has made some 36 TV documentaries, both long form and short. After all that work and all these years, Coup 53, though, is his first feature documentary, which has taken him 10 years to make. It's that alone right there, that this is your first feature length, is simply amazing, and I congratulate you, Taghi, for the incredible work that you've done. So let me start with a few questions, and we're going to open it up to the people that are watching. And have we told them how they are to submit their questions? People know that, Kendall? All right. The one thing I want to point out is that there's a button near the bottom of the screen there for people that need captioning. This is being live captioned. So if you are in need of that, I'm not sure what the button says, but I've never used the StreamYard before, but I like it already. So just look for that, and you can read the live captions to this. All right. So let's start with you, Taghi. Why don't you tell us? Give the people, some have probably not yet seen the film, so just give them a brief overview of it, how you came to make this film, and how did you find or stalk or somehow get Ray Fiennes and Walter Murch to work on this with you as a first-time feature documentary filmmaker?
Well, that's the ultimate 64 million.
64 what?
$64 million question. How did you get Ray Fiennes and Walter Murch?
Oh, well, since Brexit, that would be 64 million, about 150 pounds.
Yeah.
Right? Sorry.
When I thought of the idea, it was in 2009, and I didn't think it was going to take 10 years, and never did I dream that I was going to get Walter to be involved in this film for 4 years. He thought he was doing it for 6 months. He ended up working with me for 4 years, and I never ever thought that we were going to get the great Ray Fiennes to be a central character in this film. The idea that there's a character being played by Ray in the documentary, as you say. So none of that was planned. Why I made the film is because I grew up with the story of the coup. You know, the coup in Iran is something that is in the DNA of Iranians. They grow up with it. It's that date that's been hacked into the memory of everyone, in the heart and soul of everyone. It's what defines Iran from 53 right through to the revolution and to now.
Right.
And I think the story chose me. It was just a matter of time until I was ready enough to do something as complicated and challenging as this. I knew about Mossadegh, but not in the depth that I found out during the research and the shooting. It was a challenge to try and tell a story that Iranians know really intimately, but also reach an outside audience who doesn't know much about it or has a sketchy idea. And that was bridging that gap was something that was a challenge in telling the story with Walter. And it took 10 years because nobody would back us. Every single funding institution that would back documentary makers turned us down. We were shut down a few times.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, the documentary filmmakers who are watching this right now are like shaking their heads. You've got to be kidding. You were turned down. You couldn't find funding.
Yeah, right.
Yes, welcome to the world of documentary filmmaking.
Yeah. So no, I shouldn't complain. It's par for the course. But
where it is a badge of honor.
It is. I mean, the rejections actually were not only a badge of honor. The rejections became the fuel. We reached the point where the more we were rejected, the more determined we became, the more we felt compelled to go forward. And we had to raise
the story of the film is about what happened in 1953.
Yeah.
What led up to it, and the suffering that took place afterwards in Iran. You want to just add some more to that, in case people don't know about it or haven't seen it.
Okay, for that, very good point. In a nutshell, Iran was dominated by British interests through the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, but the British had a kind of a hold on Iran for decades and decades, interfered in every aspect of Iranian life, but the central focus of their attention in Iran was Iranian oil. And this was a concession they had from 1908. And it was a very, very unfair and very colonial mindset that controlled Iran's oil from the British and basically looted Iran's oil until Mossadegh became prime minister in 1951, purely on the ticket of nationalizing Iranian oil and ending British control. And that didn't go down well. And as soon as he nationalized...
Well, it went down well with the people who elected him. It went down well with them. That's how he got elected.
Yeah.
You're saying it didn't go down well with
the British, with Churchill.
Right.
Iranian oil was Britain's biggest overseas asset by far. Wow. And losing it was a huge blow, and they were not going to let that happen. And the idea of overthrowing and getting rid of Mossadegh was more or less in motion the moment he nationalized Iranian oil. And that began the ball got it rolling. There were some negotiations that happened, but they were like keeping a face. In the background, the coup was being planned. They got the Americans involved, and it finally happened in '53. MI6 and CIA. This was very much an MI6-led operation. It was an MI6 masterminded idea, and then they brought the Americans in. Eisenhower was very much up for it. Truman wasn't. Truman wasn't really going to go ahead with this, but things changed, and Churchill and Eisenhower saw eye to eye, and it happened. The CIA was a new kid on the block. It had money, and it wanted to play, and the British said, come and play in Iran, and we'll give you some of that oil.
And as a result of the coup and the installation of the Shah, you're born, about 10 years later?
Yeah. Yes, I was born in 1960. I spent the first 15 years of my life during the Shah's rule. I grew up with SAVAK and that whole, post-coup revolution years.
Police and all of that.
Yeah. I went to school when my teachers were arrested frequently by SAVAK. They would disappear, and the principal would say, your so-and-so teacher is on holiday, and we knew holiday was SAVAK.
I would have loved to have told a few of my teachers that SAVAK was going to be coming soon. I love most of my teachers. I did go to Catholic school, so... anyways, okay. So now we know the story. Now tell us the story of your two compatriots here, of Walter joining with you in this endeavor, and then Rafe coming in to.
Walter tells that story much better than I do because his perspective. We met in New York. So
let's hear from you, Walter.
Yeah, I was in New York in 2012. Editing another documentary, Particle Fever, about the search for the Higgs boson, particle physics. And turned out, fortuitously, that the gentleman who was financing that film was also in part financing Coup 53. And there was an event at his apartment. There were about 40 people there, among whom was Taghi. And I just written a book, a translation of Italian poetry. And that was the event, was me talking about this book. And Taghi came up to me afterwards and said, what are you doing in New York? And so we immediately started talking physics. I said we'd been turned down by 7 festivals because they thought it stank of physics, was the explanation. And he said, let me see it. And so we had a screening, and he loved it, and he helped us get into the Sheffield Documentary Festival that won the audience award. One thing turned into another. I never thought I'd be working with Taghi, but he would come to San Francisco to raise money for the film, and he'd stay at our house and go down to Silicon Valley and collect his pennies, come back, and we'd count them, and off he'd go back to London. And as the strange wheel of filmmaking turns, I was fired from Tomorrowland after 15 months of work, and I was sitting on the sofa wondering what was going to happen next. And Taghi and my wife, Aggie, put their heads together and said, you need to go to London for 6 months and work on this little documentary. I thought, what a great idea. Well, here we are 6 years later.
Wow.
And
you decided to live there.
Yeah, exactly. So we've been living in London. My wife is English, and we've been living in London working with Taghi, doing all kinds of amazing cinematic and uncinematic legal wrangles. But it's been fascinating. So that's the story. As soon as we started working on the film, there was a Hollywood studio financing a good part of it, supplemented by this gentleman from New York, and then they suddenly, inexplicably, disappeared. They pulled out of the project, and we were left high and dry. So we had to shut down. Taghi went back, raised more money. We worked for another year, and then we shut down again. So very typical kind of on-off relationships. But that was great, actually, because the more we worked on it, the more we discovered. We could set the blade of our plow deeper and deeper into the countryside and come up with more and more fragments of the past.
Wow.
Rafe has just been in a film that's coming out soon called The Dig, about the Sutton Hoo treasures, and he can talk about the archaeology of going down into the earth. So that's what we kept on doing.
So let me ask then, so now the intersection between you and Rafe being involved in this film, did you guys come together over physics, Italian poetry, or did you both happen to work on The English Patient? I'm asking for a friend.
Open door seat.
Well,
Rafe,
we bonded. We met and bonded on English Patient back in 1995, and that was a great experience to be not obviously working in proximity to Walter, but through Anthony Minghella's collegiate atmosphere he created, I was very aware of Walter's presence on the film, and of course, obviously, when I saw it. And Anthony Minghella would talk with great enthusiasm and excitement about what he was learning from Walter. And of course, that film went on to have a good journey. So anyway, cut back to 2 years ago, 2018. I'm at the National Theatre, as Walter said earlier, doing Antony and Cleopatra. And Walter and Taghi approached me and say, we have a project we're working on. Would you be interested in participating? And if you're interested, come. And I think you told me what it was about, but both of you invited me to the cutting room to look at what you were doing, to give me a feeling about where I would fit into a documentary. And I was immediately hooked by the footage I was shown and by the kind of story that Taggy and Walter were making, and the Norman Derbyshire, who is the MI6 officer who was interviewed by a BBC series some years ago. The BBC series, which
Granada.
was Granada. Sorry. Yeah. Granada, ITV, not BBC. Forget that. Anyway,
Same thing.
The point is that there was a missing interview. They had material from this independent television series looking at the coup, interviewing many participants in the coup, British and American, Foreign Office diplomats, and there was a missing interview. And so what they were proposing was, we have the transcript, we've got the transcript of the interview of the MI6 officer, but we don't have the material that was shot. So we're thinking of you being the voice and presence and the physical presence of this MI6 officer called Norman Derbyshire. And because of the way it was edited and what they were doing, it was very exciting. It was like a detective story, thriller, spy thriller detective. So I said yes, but I said, as Walter said earlier, I said, I'm doing Antony and Cleopatra, and I haven't got the headspace all the time to learn and learn it. You'll have to find a way for me to speak it. So Taggy and Walter came up with, well, it's something that's done often, which is, you can have this text in your eye line. But I think I got familiar with it, and over the course of the shooting, the sentences and the phrasings of the transcript sort of dropped into me. But what was exciting was I thought that what Taggy and Walter were presenting about the history, I was ignorant of the history of the coup.
You didn't know. No.
I didn't. So I felt the importance of the story. As you were saying earlier, Michael, about we need to educate ourselves about our histories, and there's so much in the current climate generally about how ignorant we are of our own history, that we get only shown one side, especially as a Brit. I've been brought up on British triumphs and British successes, and it's been a discovery even now to know where there's the shadow side of any country. And this was a revelation to learn from Taggy's film what went on.
I love your part in this film because it's you're not playing this person as an actor would, right? But you're not just narrating what he said in that series. I mean, the script for you in this, these were words that were not written as a script. These were normal. This was actually documentary words that were real. They're real. They're real words that came out of this agent's mouth.
That's right.
In that series.
So they were because they were spoken at some point by this man. They were kind of accessible to say. They had a phrasing and a pattern or shape or movement which made it as speech. Often as an actor, you have to negotiate a writer's ear. Writer writes something that can be great or it can be artificial, and you have to naturalize it. But this had its own naturalism built into it.
Did that make it easier or harder?
It made it easier. I feel I could hear his voice. I could feel I could hear this sort of man saying these things. I could, in my inner ear, I felt I could hear it.
Well, I think, and this is to an actor, I assume this is probably one of the best compliments one could give you, is that 5-10 minutes into the film, I'm not sitting there thinking Ray Fiennes is there telling me what this guy was saying. I actually start to think of you as him. And that essentially you brought him to life. And my brain isn't even, how that works. When a film is done well, this is the best thing that can happen. In a documentary, though, this is you are walking a bit of a tightrope, And it's just, it was such a genius idea for the two of you to approach Rafe with this. And not knowing probably, because you're just thinking this in your heads, how would he pull this off? How would he do this? And then to have him create something that, again, Rafe, you say that this happens a lot, but maybe it does in some kind of, maybe in some news documentaries, I don't know, but I don't see a lot of this in documentaries, American documentaries, maybe. And I just was fascinated and mesmerized by it, and it made the story even richer. So hats off to you for pulling that off in such a wonderful way, and to the two of you for coming up with a crazy idea that if you did have a studio or people that you did have to answer to money-wise, they would have liked the idea to put Rafe Fiennes in big letters on the marquee, the opening titles or whatever, but they never would have ever got what was probably in your heads. And kudos to you for that.
Well, asking Rafe was all Walter's idea. This whole thing, all the best ideas in Coup 53 in its four years of editing are Walter's ideas. I was just a sous chef bringing things to his table.
I see.
Director's hyperbole.
So when he brought the idea up to you,
yeah,
the sous chef,
yeah,
what were your first words to him? And be honest.
Well, the moment he told me, we were walking to lunch from the cutting room, and he said, and Rafe was in his mind because I think they'd actually been to see Antony and Cleopatra, so it was fresh in his mind, and we were thinking about, we should get an actor maybe just to read the words, simply just read the words and have the words on the screen and the actor's voice. And then Walter said, "What do we ask Rafe?" I said, "What a great idea! Fantastic!" I could hear Rafe's voice the moment he said Rafe. Having read that transcript so many times, as what Rafe said, these were real words, and I thought, I can imagine Rafe saying these things. A few days passed, and I added to it. I said, "Well, why don't we actually film him at the hotel itself, rather than have him coming to the studio or just read the words?" And that's how the idea evolved. It was like Walter would throw me a ball, I would play with it and send it back, and it would evolve. And by the end, we had Rafe at the hotel. We had him going. By the way, the amazing thing Rafe does in the film, it's just shot in under an hour. We only had 3 hours with him, 2 hours of prep and light and setup and makeup and breakfast. Very good breakfast, I seem to remember. And it was just an hour and 4 takes. 4 takes and an hour.
Everything I saw in the documentary that Rafe does was done in an hour?
1 hour of filming and 4 takes.
Okay, wow. Rafe, you must have at some point said, there must have been a voice in your head going, this is either a great idea or this is really messed up. How did you land on this? Because you had to have made some peace with, screw it, I'm going to do this. This is.
No, I just had a gut. A lot of I hope most of the time I make choices on a gut feeling.
Wow.
And I just was excited, as I was saying, excited by the material that Taggy. But no, that's it. Taggy and Walter came to the National. They showed me stuff on a computer. Then I went to the editing suite. That's right. And it was exciting. It was the way it was made. What the essential equation of the film, which was already there. We want to find out about Mossadegh, and we want to find out what the British were doing, and here are these people remembering, and oh, look, here's a transcript of this guy. Where is the guy? Where is he? Where's the interview? It's not here. And what he's saying is incendiary and completely exposing of British manipulation and fomenting of the coup. And so it seemed, well, of course, as Taggy said, it's a story people know in Iran, but I don't think people know in England exactly.
We don't know it in America either.
I just want to emphasize also that Norman Derbyshire, the character that Rafe channels, is a very, very big fish. He's an undercover agent, but he was a co-author of Operation Ajax. So he wrote the screenplay for how to stage this coup with an American CIA agent. And once the coup was underway, he was directing, kind of like a marionettist, events on the ground by radio. He had agents that have been planted there years and years and years earlier, agents of the British who knew when to call out the crowd. I mean, the crowd that we saw in Washington, D.C. yesterday was duplicated by the crowd that was assembled in Tehran in 1953. And they surged just the same way to Mossadegh's house, the prime minister's house, rattling the doors, smashing the windows, exactly what we saw yesterday. But it was all being directed by Ray Fiennes, or rather Norman Arbisher, in radio communication. So he wasn't just an agent, he was the agent for the British. He spoke Farsi, he spoke Persian. He'd been in Iran since 1943 as a soldier. So he was deeply, deeply invested in the people of Iran.
I've watched the film twice now, and I have to say, when that was taking place yesterday in Washington, D.C., at some point, because Coup 53 was fresh in my mind, one of the first thoughts I had wasn't so much about the senators and the members inside, which of course I care about. And a very close friend of mine is the congressman from Flint, and he was taking cover. He was trapped inside the chamber. But actually, the first thought I had was, is Biden safe? Biden's home, just a normal house in Delaware. What are they doing right now? Because the National Guard, 2 hours into this, isn't even at the Capitol yet, at the building. And I just thinking of the film and the rush there, what happened, the first attempt of the coup, and then the second attempt. Who is protecting? It can't just be two Secret Service agents. What if this is, because then it started coming through that mobs were rushing the state houses in Utah, Georgia, Kansas, Texas, and nobody's talking about where's Biden. What it just triggered that, having just watched your film. This is that democracy, that old cliche of how fragile democracy is, and that you may say to yourself, well, we've had it for 244 years. So what? It can be gone like that. So my last question to you guys, and I'm going to open it up here so that people I see they're typing in some questions now. Where is the intersection between art and politics for each of you, in terms of projects that you choose, projects that you think about, or maybe it's just the films you like to watch? I mean, when I go and talk to film schools or whatever, I always tell them that my own personal opinion is, because I'm known politically, but I say to them, if you want to make a political film, a historical film, the politics have to come second. The art has to be first. Because if you make a crappy movie, whatever you're trying to say politically, is never going to go anywhere. So you must always think about the art of this. But I'm just curious, because you all, the diversity of the different films each of you have done over the years, I'm just curious where that, or if it ever does, cross inside your own minds, in your own creative minds,
Shut up, Michael.
the art, and whether it's politics or history or, the filmmaker is trying to say something. So this is not a rom-com question. This is a kind of a broader question. Any one of you can take that.
Walter?
There's a wonderful diagram that was in a history book about physics, and it was tracing the interdependence of art and science, not politics, and what you saw from ancient Sumeria down to the present was two lines of development in art and development in science. And inevitably what happened is that art had a bulge and then science had a bulge. And then they both kind of went into hibernation, and then art bulged and science bulged. So just as you said about the films, art, movement in art, different ways of seeing, which is what art is all about, in a sense, they break up the hard pan of the ground and start to move the compost so that the worms can get in and start growing things. And out of that comes the blossoming of science, or let's say politics, a more developed politics. But it was very interesting to see this kind of codependence that just the art does form a. People say, well, art doesn't influence anything, but it does in a very, very deep way, not in a linear way, the way we usually think of it, but in this way of breaking up the ground that is hardened because of some sclerosis in the politics of some country. And when art breaks it up, then things start to move. And, you know, I'm always interested in working on films that have this double aspect to it. The Godfather is a political film. It tells a great story, and it's almost a tale. You know, it's like once upon a time there was a king who had 4 sons, and the oldest son was in it, the youngest son was in it, and yet it is a very deep criticism of modern capitalism done subcutaneously. You know, it filters in. You know, the hypodermic needle goes in without you feeling the prick of the needle. And it's, you know, it's had a huge influence on the way people think about politics and the way they think about, you know, make him an offer he can't refuse, that kind of stuff. I learned the other day that Boris Johnson's favorite scene is the assassination scene in The Godfather, which tells you something.
Yes, and you know, it's also Trump's favorite film. He's been on the record.
There we go. It's all. I'm guilty.
Yeah, no, but I'm not surprised to hear that. Either Rafe or Tagi, do you want to get that question at all?
Well, I wanted to be an actor mainly because I loved Shakespeare. I was introduced to Shakespeare as a young boy by my mother. And as I grew up, went to school, and was conscious that I wanted to attempt being an actor, all the time driven by a love of Shakespeare that was rooted, as I've got, I just, my levels of awareness of Shakespeare grew and grew, and they keep growing. And Shakespeare's, you could say in all of his plays, there's a political theme to be discussed, but they're not. They are rooted in humanity, in his profound understanding of the endless ambiguities and paradoxes of being human. So even taking the Roman plays, and like Coriolanus, people say, oh, it's one of his most political plays, but it's rooted in a profoundly painful mother-son axis at the center of this play.
Right.
And so for me, the best awareness of politics can only come through artistic material that is profoundly rooted wisely and intelligently in what it is to be human.
Wow. You're telling me we should get to the questions. And Tagi, the first one is for you. From a man, Yusuf. He asked, Tagi, there is a lack of Middle Eastern, i.e. Arab and Persian talent in Hollywood. How important is it that we listen to these voices, and how does it feel to direct your first feature-length documentary?
Wow, that's a very good question. How does it feel to direct your first feature documentary? This has been the worst experience and the best experience of my life and filmmaking life. It's tested me in every way. It's put me through the mill. It's really, I've worked with Walter, and I used to say that I spent 4 years at the Walter Murch University in the cutting room, and the final cut, picture lock, was my graduation. I would recommend it if you really care about the subject, and that brings us to the politics. I cared about the story as an Iranian and as a filmmaker. That's what drove me. I wasn't a political filmmaker. I used to make quirky films about English eccentrics for 20 years. That was my thing. It was 9/11 and Afghanistan, and I actually went to Afghanistan, made a film there, and the invasion of Iraq that made me into a political filmmaker. In terms of diversity and lack of Arab and Middle Eastern voices, that's a pandemic in the business. It's a problem. It's a problem. It's been a challenge for me. I got shut out of British television, which is why I went into making an independent feature doc, because people like me wouldn't really get a look in, wouldn't really go anywhere. And it's still very much a club. It's still a very white club, I have to, unfortunately. But both in Hollywood and here, change needs to happen. It comes up every year, and I'm grateful for people like Steve McQueen for making this such a subject, such a prominent subject, and a real battle cry. So I hear what you say, Yusuf, but hang in there. Find a story you care about and stick with it. And no matter how they try to grind you down, just stick with it and tell your story. And find a story that connects you here. It's here, more than here. It has to get you here, and then you're good to go.
Next question is for Walter. Would you consider yourself yesterday's events at the U.S. Capitol building a coup? Does it matter how spontaneous something is or how many people are involved? Obviously I used the word at the beginning, but it's not necessarily a word people would agree with. So she wants to know your perception of it, especially having worked on this film.
Yeah, a funny story, when Tuggy and I started out in 2015, I said the name of this film is Coup 53. For an American audience, they're going to think it's about a 1953 Cadillac, the Coupe de Ville, because coup is not a current word. Well, thank God for, unfortunately, 5 or 6 years later, coup is in every headline. It was a coup yesterday. Exactly how thought out it was is hard to say, which is endemic of whatever Trump does. Is he playing 6-dimensional chess, or is he just winging it the way we think he probably is? I was taken, however, by something that Joe Biden said. He went on camera to say, everyone calm down, and he was being presidential. But he said, this is not America, he said. This isn't like America. This is, an aberration. This is not, he kept repeating that. And, that's to do with a kind of self-image. How handsome do you think you really are? But for the rest of the world, this is America, starting with Coup 53. This coup was the first time the CIA went off campus to destabilize a foreign country in another hemisphere. And we've kept doing it ever since. It became the template by which we thought we could have our way in the world. So for the rest of the world, with the exception of a few countries, what they saw in Washington, D.C. yesterday is what they see in their own country, with fake news, corrupt politicians being paid off, military intervention when it has to happen, and on and on and on. So when you see this film, you see all of these exact same things worked out back in 1953 in the way that a country can be destabilized with the participation of the people in the country. There has to be a certain element within the country that goes along with this idea for whatever reason, their own self-promotion, Anyway, that's the short answer is yes. It was a coup. It was a stupid coup. We think it's not over yet. Stuff. He's still got another 13 days. But this is what coups look like. One other thing, and I forget, maybe Taghi can remember, but we were talking to somebody, and they said most coups are silent. They're silent but deadly. They happen, and you only realize they've happened after the fact. Many people in Tehran at the time of this coup did not know that it was happening. There were no iPhones, there were no cameras around then, and certain people did know, and they knew after it had happened. But as it was happening, it was a fairly localized event. So,
Rafe, Fedra would like you to maybe expand a little more on your thinking about history and the importance of history as prologue, and that why we all should probably learn a little bit more about our history is the lessons that are there and the mistakes that we may be committing now based on what the people that came before us did.
Well, I think I feel that we're living at a time where things are exploding in our awareness of our country's history. I mean, not only obviously, so we can talk about a spectrum of things. I'm a middle-aged white Englishman with a certain kind of, a conventional grammar school education, and I would say pretty intelligent, enlightened parents. But I realize now, I'm 58, there are huge, not just historical facts, but whole experiences of people. I have to talk about my country because I feel that is where I am, but I'm not aware of. And we can talk about the Black, the Asian community, the Islamic community. There are whole areas of history which form us, which I know I don't know about, and I feel. So what was exciting about Coup 53 was here is a bit of our national experience, not negative, not making us look good, but which was us. Like, this is us. Like Walter was saying, this was England. This is England. This is, who are we? And I think we have to keep, I feel responsible to know more, to learn more. And for certainly the children going to school now, how are they being taught the history? How are they being made to think and question what is given to them? One of the most, I won't go on just to say, when I was about 9, 10, 11, I was brought up on classic historical events that made the Brits look good. Winning the Second World War, a bit. Battle of Trafalgar, Battle of Waterloo, Battle of Agincourt. These were all stuff that a little 8-year-old, 9-year-old was given. And then my parents decided to move to Ireland. And my mother claimed half Irish roots. And she sat me down, she said, you have to know that the British history in Ireland is terrible. What the British did in Ireland was just really appalling. And you have to know. I had a foster mother.
It was beyond the pale.
What?
It was beyond the pale.
Yes, but you see, I wasn't. But it was how. I mean, I think how I was so appreciative and more that my mother when she tore a veil down and said, "This has gone on," and so that's, I suppose, a tiny example of what I think we need to do. And obviously, there are all kinds of questions about retrospective judgment or retribution, which is a complicated territory. But I do think we need knowledge. I do think we need to know. We need to know, and the history teaching I had, I think, was very thin. It didn't talk about all the things that need to be talked about.
Kendall, do we have time for one more question here? I know we've gone a little long. We've already gone longer than the time it took Rafe to film all his scenes for the documentary. Okay, yeah, good. I got it. Yep. Uh-huh. So Walter, this question is for you from Tracy. She'd like to know, how did you organize all of the footage? And considering it's from so many different sources, and you know, she'd also like to know if you could just share one or two of your best practices, as she calls it, as an editor.
Yeah, well, every film is different, and you use different techniques for every film. I mean, there are some core principles. I'm a compulsive note taker, so I like to look at the footage and take notes on it with time code, and I do that just to get it in my head. And then I know that the notes are there, but I almost never refer to them because just the act of taking the notes is something that gets it in. But you can imagine that that's a lot of detail work for 532 hours. And I didn't take notes on everything, but enough to kind of get the matrix to solidify a little bit. But basically, there were 4 strands. We called them the colored threads of this carpet that we are weaving, Persian carpet. But there was the expert historian thread, people like Stephen Kinzer. Then there was the Iranian testimony thread. And then there was the historical archive thread. And then there was the investigative Sherlock Holmes thread. And I created timelines of nothing but each of those. So there was a 4-hour version of the film that was nothing but historians tossing the ball to each other, answering each other's questions. And then I did the same thing with the Iranian version, all of the witnesses and the participants in the coup. And then I did it with the archive, arranging all the archive historically. And they were kind of little, big 4-hour films. And we sat down and watched them all. And then we came up with a structure using these colored cards that you can see in the film. I'm in the film as a Watson to Taghi's Sherlock. And we figured out a path. It's not the path of the finished film, but it is a path. And then we wove that into an 8-hour film. There is an 8-hour version of this film. And then at that point, which was June of 2018, we were at what are we going to do? Maybe this could be a 6-part series or not. And we decided, yes, it's going to be a standalone film. And that was right about the time that Rafe agreed to be in the film. And Derbyshire, as I said, was such a big fish because he wrote the coup and he ran it. So he became the spine. And that allowed us to condense 8 hours down to just under 2 hours. So that's basically what the was here.
You missed working with film back in the days when you didn't have 500 or 5,000 hours of footage?
No. This would absolutely have been impossible to make as a celluloid film. Just the idea of, on Apocalypse Now, we had 236 hours of film. This had more than double that. And it was just, one editor and an associate editor, Evie, and Taghi, and associate producers. But the editing room was basically 3 people rather than 30 people, which it would have had to have been if it was a film.
Before we go, we didn't get into it in this discussion, and it's too long of a story. But that this film was available a few months ago, and suddenly it was yanked from theaters. I tried to book it for my theater, and I was told that it got pulled. And then I found out the true story from the two of you as to what happened. And this is not the only time I've heard this sort of story where people are making a documentary, and then there are those who try to stop the documentary from being made or released or whatever. And in this case, I know we're out of time. We can't tell the story, but if there's someplace you could recommend people could read about this or whatever, I think for documentary filmmakers, this is a story that's all too familiar in terms of the concept of fair use and those who don't believe in fair use.
Yeah.
And those who believe that they own history when no one owns history. History is for all of us.
Yeah.
But somehow they try to figure out a way they can justify copywriting that which happened, say in this instance, to all the people of Iran and how it affected people around the world for many, many years.
Yeah.
Still affects us in the United States. It's 1 year anniversary this week of the United States assassinating an Iranian leader. If we have just 2 minutes,
I'll try to summarize that because Walter and I have been through the worst 4 months of this project. In fact, the last 4 months trying to save the film, make the 10 years that it took to make it feel like a picnic or a walk in the park. But being kind of committed filmmakers, we stuck by it. And in fact, I filmed everything. And rather than talk about it here or write an article, I'm actually making a follow-up sequel where all the issues that have emerged in the last 4 months will be in the film. A lot of evidence and material that's not in the film will be in this follow-up, and everything else that's unfolded. We will deal with the idea of fair use and copyright and all the other issues. We will get really deeply into the Derbyshire story in depth. And a lot of questions that have been raised about the film will be in this follow-up. It's called Coup 53.1 as a sequel. And it'll all be there. And I'm writing about it as well. I'm also doing a one-man show in Edinburgh this year at the Fringe about this entire experience of making this film and then the fallout.
Oh, wow.
Book your tickets now. It's called Coup 53, the making of a devortal, because there's a devortal here you can see. We fought, we saved the film. I have to say, on the flip side and the positive side, this film relies heavily on some magnificent work done by the team who made End of Empire. Their interviews are brilliant. Their research is incredible. And there are great institutions in British television. And we owe them a great debt of gratitude for being able to use their material fully licensed and paid for, officially now, not being used as fair dealing or fair use.
But I thought you properly credited them. I think anybody who's British, maybe who saw that documentary 20 or 30 years ago, but the idea of maybe I might just be weird. When I see a snippet or a scene or something from one of my films lifted, and it's in another film, I'm like so excited that somebody wanted to take that and share it with even more people. But I mean, maybe I'm in the minority on that sort of thing, but because I just think information and knowledge should be as open source as possible.
Yeah,
glad you fought for this, and that it is now available.
The film is back online. We're going to put a slide at the back. If you go to coup53.com, you can find the screenings everywhere, both in the US and UK. It's opening in the UK tomorrow in virtual theaters. I know we are out of time, but this is a very important moment for me. First of all, to thank Rafe, Walter, and Michael. Michael, it's such an honor to have you present this and support the film and give us moral support. Rafe, you're the absolute star of this movie in every way. You've transformed Coup 53 from a documentary to something other that's indescribable. And Walter Murch, God love you. Cinema, God's invention. But I have to say, this film, not being funded by anybody, everybody and their grandmother and their pets rejected this film. some amazing, amazing individuals put their hands in their own pockets and funded this film over the years. They stuck by me. They're visionary people. They are so generous and so committed. And I've got to mention Jerry Orstrom, Nedano Barry, Nushin. These are the people. Bob Cohn, you see the names here. These people made the film possible. We're going to put their names on our website. You see them all here. Shana Nasiri, Nushin, the Rockefeller funds. These people made this film possible, and they stuck by us when everybody else bailed out. And thank you. We owe you a huge debt of gratitude for making this movie possible. You've helped truth come out and history be made. And that's the end of my spiel. I have to do this. I know people thank their sponsors, but this is a real, genuine thanking the sponsors.
And listen, every documentary filmmaker watching this knows exactly how you feel, and feels the same way toward all the people who make a difference in helping us get these movies made. So, no, that was wonderful that you did that, and so thank you for making this film. Thank you, Rafe, for all the great work that you've done and being supportive, and Walter. The movies got better because of you, and it's. I hope you live another 100 years.
Yeah, I've booked it already. Yeah.
Well, I know that Tagi has said it's the fact that he would get to have a master class every day for 5 years makes everybody watching this very, very envious of him having that experience with you. So thank you for supporting him and for helping to bring the truth out about a group of people that are demonized by so many people, especially in my country. And I know that most Americans who are good, they are good at their core, but are kept ignorant and or slow learners. But eventually we get it, and when they watch this film, they will understand, and they will be a little upset at how lied to we've been about the Iranian people, and what was done to them is still done to them in our name with our tax dollars. And so that's a gift to America. So thank you for that. If I can be so magnanimous in speaking for Americans. There's only 330 million of us. Thank you, all of you, for participating in this. Everybody watching this, please watch this film if you haven't seen it. If you've already seen it, please share it with other people. If you're out in LA, it's part of the Lemley virtual cinema series. You can check it out there. I have a theater I restored in Michigan, and I'm going to be bringing Coup 53 in 2 weeks to my theater. I can't wait to show it to people in little Traverse City, Michigan. So thank you, all of you, for participating. All of you in Europe and the non-Europe part called England. Thank you. I'm sorry. I can't. You can't leave. You're Europe. You can't leave Europe. Europe wouldn't exist today if it wasn't for the sacrifice of the British people. You helped to let it live.
It's a madness.
It's madness.
It's a madness. I'm unapologetically saddened by what's happened. Yeah.
Wow.
Anyway.
Things will get better. All right, everybody. Thank you. Have a good evening, and we'll hopefully all see each other soon.
Thank you, Michael.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Go watch Coup 53, everybody. Thank you.